Hello, hello, and thank you so much for joining us for the Digital Career Success Series. I am Landy Spearman, your guest host, and today we are super excited to be talking about starting your career and considering advanced degrees, certification, and schooling. I am Landy Spearman, a multi-generational expert and speaker. I also do executive coaching, and I am ready to get started with our advanced degree career success series. Today, we have two fabulous panelists who are ready to kick us off and give us two different perspectives. One of those perspectives is from Michael Tomlin Crutchfield. He is the president and CEO of MTC and Company. He is a Bloomberg government web producer, producing and covering stories of the 2012 presidential election, Google real estate and workplace services representatives, work with Ford Motor Company as a communications specialist, a lead writer online. He's very well connected, and he also has a degree from Howard University in journalism. Welcome, welcome, Michael Tomlin. So happy to have you this morning and looking forward to this robust conversation. Let's go ahead and jump right on in.
Sure. Thank you for that amazing introduction, Landy. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Tomlin Crutchfield. As Landy said, I am the president and CEO of the MTC and Company. It's a company that I started in 2017 to focus on high-impact organizations, helping them develop communication strategies and marketing platforms and plans. So the question for me, the first one, is to decide whether to go back to school or not. So I'll give an intro of my background and how I got to this point in my career journey. So I studied journalism at Howard University, and upon graduating in 2011, I started my career as a journalist at Bloomberg in Washington, D.C. And there I led digital communication efforts and writing and web production for our Bloomberg government platform, and that essentially covered the intersection of business government relations and government decisions. So there I covered events like the 2012 election, the State of the Union address for 3 years while I was there, as well as special packages including the Defense Department sequestration in 2011 and storytelling around President Obama's initiatives while he was in office. From there, I was experiencing a bit of burnout because as a journalist, your job is 24/7, 365. So coming straight out of college, I was accustomed to going home for Christmas for a break and not having to do anything, as well as any other holiday. So going straight into journalism became a lot for me. And while I was at Bloomberg Government, I was exposed to people who had specific backgrounds and master's degrees in finance, technology sectors, as well as energy, and every sort of individual sector that you think the federal government can cover. We had specialists, journalists, as well as analysts who covered those areas. So I had a wide breadth of people around me who had a lot of different experiences as attorneys, as consultants, and the list goes on. So I was interested in going back to school because as a journalist and a journalism major, making a pivot at age 22, 23 didn't seem very possible with limited experience. So I actually attended Harvard University's African American Student Union's annual business school gala and conference, which happens every spring, I believe. So I went to Harvard and Cambridge. I attended all the sessions. I got to go sit in on different classes at Harvard. And during my time there, I had a lot of interactions with current students and alum. And during my conversations, a lot of people helped me assess whether going to business school would be the right decision for me, not just at that point in my life, but also throughout the breadth of my career. So during those conversations, I made a lot of connections with people, kept in touch, had lunch with a few of them who were in Cambridge, some who were in DC, even some during my trips to New York City. And upon just talking to people a lot more about the decision and even getting to the point where I actually took the GMAT, I decided that business school wasn't the best route for me at that time. But I still wanted to make a change in my career because journalism was pretty demanding and I had to make a shift. So what I did as a next step was I looked at my resume and looked at all of the things that I did while I was at Bloomberg and decided what excited me about my job and what I was looking for in the next step of my career. So as I mentioned, work-life balance was extremely important for me. So that was number one. Number two was also taking a lead in writing. The most exciting part about my time at Howard, and even before that, what prompted me to want to be a journalist was to be a writer and working in a digital space where I essentially led packaging digital packages. So if you look at a news site or any site that you see, there's someone behind the scenes writing all the content on those websites, as well as sending those push notifications to your phone. And that was my team. So I wanted to take more time to actually write and decide like what type of communications and the type of stories that we're telling. So I decided to make a shift to go into corporate storytelling, just to take a break from my time as a journalist. So with that said, I took out of a notebook, I literally wrote down everything I did while I was at Bloomberg and re-edited my resume to target those skills and uplift those parts of my job. So I started looking for communication jobs, and I landed one in Detroit, Michigan, with Ford Motor Company. So that job initially started off as me not only writing, but also using my skill set as a web producer. So I was packaging the content on Ford's website. So if you go to Ford.com today and you see like the head banner about a new vehicle or even an investor relations release, my team was responsible for doing that work. But while I was at Ford Motor Company, what helped me propel my career even further was my writing skill set, my background as a writer and journalist. I got to interview people across the company in different teams, from engineers to marketing executives, as well as our C-level suite executives to talk about Ford's story. And that helped me land a role where I was leading the communications for the Lincoln brand. And at that time in 2013, Lincoln was kind of viewed in the marketplace as your old man's car. So we wanted to kind of change that whole narrative altogether. And I began interviewing people across the company and helping our marketing team develop a campaign called the Hello Again Tour, where we reintroduced the brand to consumers across the country. It became a huge success. We got to tell stories and do events in Atlanta and Pebble Beach, California. And I even got to do the launch of our new MKX truck in Beijing, China. So at that point, I was very excited about the work I was doing at Ford. And I was tapped by a recruiter on LinkedIn at Google in California. So I pursued a role there, ended up on a team of 4 that led global communications for Google's real estate and workplace services portfolio globally. So that included office openings from offices in New York City expansion to Dublin, Ireland, which is their second headquarters, as well as the first Africa office opening at Google in Johannesburg. So I got to travel around the world to our different office openings, talk to reporters about the type of work Google was doing in that space, the investments in the community, as well as the perks and services that Google's known for outside of the company. So when people think of Google and think about you get free rides to work, people have free food, and Googlers get massages, et cetera, the list goes on and on. My team was responsible for getting those stories out there in Business Insider, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, all the places that you can imagine that you've read these amazing stories about Google, my team is responsible for. But I've reached a point in my career where I had been doing communications for 4 years, and I decided I didn't want to just be the person who was telling the story about the work that companies did. I wanted to be on the side where I could actually be creating those programs and those initiatives and those campaigns that wow people to begin with, because I have a lot of creative thoughts in my head and I wanted to take the lead on those. But again, I ran into a wall because a lot of those roles were either brand management, marketing executives, or marketing managers. And even if people had a marketing background, a lot of people at companies like Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, where I was in Silicon Valley, had advanced degrees. So all of that kind of shifted my perspective on the type of work that I would do. And in 2016, during the election of President Trump, it became clear to me that another passion of mine was to serve organizations with a higher impact and get people more informed about the good that's happening in the world and ways that they can contribute to that, either by giving money, giving time, or even going out and voting altogether. So I left corporate America altogether at the beginning of 2017 and became an entrepreneur. The scary part about that for me was I had no idea what I was doing. I literally had no sort of connection to like what entrepreneurship actually looked like for me. And I didn't have a job lined up either. So I literally just put in my 2 weeks, and 2 weeks later, I was not getting another paycheck. So the first thing that I did was reach out to my network broadly. So I crafted a note, put together a list of high-level experience that I had and the work that I was good at and what I was interested in doing, sent it out to my network on LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as people who are in my email contacts. And within a week, I landed a contract with the City of Detroit Mayor's Office, using and leveraging my transferable skills to make not only a career shift, but a shift into entrepreneurship, and got my first contract as a change communications managers for the Mayor's Office in Detroit and the Chief Financial Officer. So we landed a huge contract to shift and change the HR and payroll processes in the city of Detroit with a new software. So my job was to tell the story to everyone in the city of Detroit as employees, so they could not only be aware about it, but be excited about the probability of having more accurate pay and better time off and managing their demographics online. But I also got to do some really cool communications work with local outlets from TV to radio and print publications across Metro Detroit. And then I began a contract with the National Urban League, which is one of the clients I have right now, on an education initiative that was sponsored by the Gates Millennium Foundation. So over the past 2 years, we've had a campaign that grew from an idea to a full platform website that provides information to families, lawmakers, students, and educators on ways they can advocate for better education in their hometowns and their states. We've had a lot of great coverage of it. We've actually influenced laws in over 18 states across America to encompass equitable and fair education for all students. In the latest project that I did, the two latest projects I did, over this past June, I led and created H&M's 2019 Pride campaign and developed a campaign that focused more so on celebrating everyone's individuality and in an equal way. We did a cool commercial with a couple influencers and celebrities that was nationwide. We even had a whole line of clothing that was sold in the stores that a percentage of the proceeds went to a variety of different charities that supported H&M's initiatives. And then I did a back-to-school campaign with Rolex called Time's Up. I didn't pick the name because Time's Up's a little problematic right now. But the goal of it was that we did spreads in a couple of different higher income magazines like Forbes, as well as like Rob's Report that talked about Rolex's investment in the community. So I got to go around New York City interviewing teachers and students to talk about the importance of going back to school. So that's kind of my career path in, I wouldn't say a nutshell because it was a bit more than that. But it's been an interesting journey. And I think the most important things that have kept me grounded throughout this process have been able to remind myself of my value, as well as document the type of work that I've done throughout my time at each job, and create and tell my own story in a way that helps me get to the next step of my career.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. We will go a little bit deeper into everything that you just unveiled, which included your experience, your shift, your pivots, your decisions, your network. We will definitely delve deeper. I encourage all participants to stay to the end. Please stay to the end and do utilize the chat. There is a question and answer session that we'll have at the end. And I encourage you to participate, ask the questions, start putting those questions in there now so that our panelists can be sure to get them answered for you. Michael just gave us a variety of different gems to think about and consider. Let's now shift from thinking about taking your career and involving an MBA, a PhD, a master's, an advanced degree or certificate. The question again is to go to school or not to go to school. Let's get it started. Andrew, let's get you into this conversation. Please first participate in the poll and let us know, are you considering a degree? And then Michael, let's go ahead and get you started.
Okay. All right.
And introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today as the president of the New York MBA Association.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Hamilton, and I am the president of the Metro New York Black MBA chapter. Can you hear me? Guys hear me?
Yes, just fine.
All right. So I went a different route than my other presenter. I started out as working in a company in Long Island called Expedites International. It was a logistics company, 3PL. It was the first company that was able to hire me. And I just used that experience to further myself ahead in the business world. I had a epiphany 5 years in working there. Do want to pursue post-education to further my career along. As I polled different people in the company that were, I consider them my thought leaders and mentors and sponsors, the majority of them said, yes, you need to go to post-secondary school. And the one thing that all of them had a similar comment was to the ability to learn and make mistakes, but at the same time, don't get penalized for them. And they made references to some personal things they've done in which they suffered by not making the right decision. But they encouraged me to go to business school where I could learn those mistakes in that classroom setting. I'm able to grow off. Another part of that conversation was the ability to work on teams, how to have influence on people that you're not paying them, you're not getting anything directly out of them, but how do you get someone to do something for you? So going to business school was a great learning environment where I was able to develop and know how to work and manage on teams. And that translated into my career going further ahead and where I initially started. That translates now, about say 15 years later, I'm able to be still an excellent student. And that is able for me to be a better communicator, a better facilitator, but also a better teammate. I think that a lot of times that the best thing you could do in any organization is how to join, flow with a team, possibly lead a team, but more or less how to get the results you need for the team to look successful or the organization to look successful. So those are my pivots and why I went into pursue a graduate degree.
So can you also expand, and thank you for that, Andrew, can you expand a little bit more on your process when you were looking at making a decision to choose a school and then a specific program? What were some of the thoughts that you went through? You talked a little bit about your networking and polling your sponsors and speaking to them about your thoughts, your concerns. What actually helped you to choose a school and choose the program?
I went through that's a good question. I went through a series of filters per se. So one, I wanted to be in a comfortable environment. Does the school respect me as a respected institution? Two, I had to fit my lifestyle. I was still working full time, but I didn't want to stop working to pursue a degree. So I had to find an environment that respects someone that's a career person that's also pursuing a post-secondary education. And number three was timing. I think a lot of times when you pursue a school or pursue something afterwards, I always believe in timing is involved. Is it the right time for me to go back? Is it the right time for me to pursue education? And you will find that even though every school markets and brands themselves as the business school of their network, you will find that necessarily the top school may not be the best school for you, supposedly, and even the school that's right under your nose may be the best school for you. My father used the adage: you want to be a big fish in a small pond versus a big fish in the ocean. You can still get caught or eaten. So that was one of the reasons. That was my choice list of filters for me to select what school to.
That's great. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about leveraging your degree. So when you think about leveraging your degree and the access, you talked a little bit about teams and skills and networks and understanding your influence. You got those skills from part of just doing the work, part of being a part of those teams and having a safe space to learn and fail forward. Can you talk a little bit about leveraging the degree today?
I call it like insurance. So someone that's looking to take a risk on me, they know with a degree and they have in hand have some liability insurance saying that this person is competent enough to do the work. The other part of it is the degree will reflect my ability to retain, ability to quantify information in a way that that someone will need to get either success or get a project that's done. Is also a great talking point because a lot of times people ask you what school you go to, and you always say I went to this one and that one, and you can start finding commonalities in the conversation based on you going to school or not. But definitely with the degree, leveraging the degree has gotten me to the point whereas now I'm part of this great organization, National Black MBA Association, in which now I'm president of the New York chapter. So the degree has gotten, I won't say overt, it's a direct outcome, but definitely helped me as far as some indirect residuals that I've gained from over the years. So.
Understood. Thank you. Well said. So let's talk a little bit about questions and get your questions. Please use the question section that should be in your window. Look in your window for Q&A in the chat section and go ahead and send in your questions. Again, I encourage you to stay until the end. We do have a prize, a raffle for engagement. We'll select one of our participants who are getting not just their questions answered, but we're also engaging in the conversation. We're here today to share and engage with you in this conversation. So please do directly type into that chat box any questions that you have. Let's continue the conversation, gentlemen. Okay, Michael, let's talk a little bit about your pivot, your decision to pivot. There are times in our lives, and you spoke you spoke about the various times you made decisions to pivot and how you use your transferable skills to do that. Can you speak a little bit about that experience going through, if you can recall what that felt like, what decisions you had to make, and then talk about what resources you use and what did that look and feel like in those moments?
Absolutely. I think the first time actually was at my very first job. And I think we all have those moments in our careers, and sometimes they're passive, sometimes they remain constant, where we just decide that what we're doing that day we're not sure if that's what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And for me, I knew going into that specific role as a web producer that I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to write. And I knew that writing was a portion of the job, but it wasn't as much of it as I would have liked. So in the beginning stages of that role, it was kind of writing intensive. I had to literally sit down and write all our headlines. I had to edit a lot of the reporters' work. I had to develop a database of all our elected officials with their biographies, their voting records, as well as keep a kind of updated blog, if you will, on the type of work that was happening on the Senate and the House floors, which was really cool because I hadn't had that sort of political journalism experience before. So it was great. And then as things sort of intensified work-wise, that the balance between my actual writing work and my work at doing the hard coding, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and like just general building of the website repeatedly became more important and more heavy on our metrics and on the success of our team than the actual content that we produce. So that more of that work went to the journalism team, and more of the kind of gritty or the heavy lifting on the technical side went to our team. So I reached a point probably 8 months in where I thought to myself, okay, I really like this company. Either I can find a new role here, or I could talk to my manager about what the kind of long-term looks like for our team. So the first thing I did was have a sit down with her during one of our one-on-one meetings, which happened every week, and just said, hey, I really enjoy the writing aspect of this role. Do you see an opportunity for us to, or for me specifically, to continue doing that or get a different balance like we had initially? Her response was, actually, as time goes on, it's going to be more and more technical work and less writing. However, there is an opportunity for you to create a coverage base for our congressional coverage with our journalism team. So you could actually be like an embed for our team 2 days a week. So that actually was a nice fix for me for a while, because I got to actually go to a different office in DC and work out of that one embedded with our journalism team, and learn a lot about politics and writing from seasoned journalists. But that didn't become less work. It became like double the workload. So yes, I got more writing in, but I also got a lot more technical work. So it became like I was doing 2 jobs at one point. So then I had another, I guess, come to Jesus moment, if you will, about 13 months in, where I said, okay, I learned that this role is going to be more of what I don't want to do. And it's tough for me to find a way to do the thing that I want to do, because I lacked a lot of experience. And like I mentioned before, being embedded with journalists, I was also embedded with analysts who are former consultants and attorneys. So I got to talk to people about their experience in their roles before they got to Bloomberg and what they were planning to do after. And the people who were the most interesting to me were the people who wanted to sort of get experience where we were, but then either start their own sort of consultant firms, or they wanted to go on and do more high impact work where they had more of a decision in the actual processes that we were covering. So for example, there were people on our defense team who were writing white papers and stories about Lockheed Martin contracts and how the US Department of Defense was working with different countries to strengthen national security. Those people who had consulting backgrounds wanted to use this as an opportunity to learn more. So when they went back into that space, that they could actually be the people who were making the decisions on that end. So that's kind of where I felt like I wanted to go longer term in my career. And a lot of those people had advanced degrees. So I actually had a colleague who told me about Harvard's African American Student Association's conference every year. So I went to that, and that's where I met a lot of people who were working in that space. And they actually told me that there were ways that they had made pivots and that I can make a pivot without getting an MBA. So that prompted, with all the information that I had from talking to my manager, being embedded in a different team, taking on new responsibilities in my current role, and also just talking to people who had the degrees and that experience, that's when I decided that I could make a pivot without taking 2 years off of work. And I could actually leverage the skills that I had learned over that year and a half to make my next career move. And that was the first time I made a career shift. And that's when I went from being a journalist to the flip side, or the dark side, as journalists call it, to go into communications. And once I was in the communication space, I just became more and more hungry for like different opportunities to learn more and like grow in every aspect that I could. So it went from just going from a career shift to a industry pivot. So I went from an automotive space to the technology space in Silicon Valley. And when I was there, I realized that, you hear a lot of terms from Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and other big tech companies about how they're disruptors and they want to change the world and make the world a better place through technology. And I felt that I could make the world a better place by helping people be informed and have better information and make better decisions for their lives, which is how I ended up going into consulting for myself and initially working for organizations like the National Urban League, H&M, like Rolex, who have investments in communities and would like to help people accomplish their goals and their professionally and personally through their investments in community, through more information. And I decided to be the person to help people get that information.
Thank you. Wow. So I use this term shift starter, hashtag shift starter. I think that I'm going to loan that to you because you definitely know how to pivot and shift in many ways. So thank you for sharing that. I have a couple questions from the audience, so let's make sure we get those answered.
Of course.
One of the questions, let's see, and you kind of spoke to that. Should I go straight into a master's program after undergrad, or should I gain work experience first? You spoke to that and thinking about going through the process and taking the exam and everything. Do you want to expand on that for me?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is the decision that a lot of people in undergrad kind of feel like they have to make early on. And based off of my conversations with people who have gone back to school, not just business school or getting their MPP or law school, is that a lot of people have increased their chances of actually getting to the school that they wanted to, and also having a clearer decision on what they want to focus on by having some sort of work experience before applying and actually going into school. And at the time I was at Harvard Business School's conference, the average age nationally for an MBA student was 27. So if you think about the time that you're graduating from college, you're either like 21, 22, 23, maybe 24, there's still at least a 3-year gap between getting into school as a student and in graduate school as a student and being an undergrad. So in between that time period, you get to get a job. You get to know what it's like to be in corporate America. You can decide, like, you may have gotten a finance degree in undergrad and you work in the finance sector at one of the big banks and say, hey, I don't actually like this. So if I got an MBA, I know that I don't want to go back into banking. Or you may have started a job as a consultant and say, hey, I don't really like this, but I know that with my finance degree or with my accounting degree or my marketing degree, I could do something different, especially with an MBA. So I think it's helpful to know what those fields are like before making that decision. It's harder when you're trying to become a doctor or an attorney because unless you actually are a lawyer or you are a doctor, you don't really know firsthand in a day-to-day experience what that's like. But I'm sure there are internships or externships and other opportunities to get that sort of exposure. But I'm only speaking from my experience, specifically when it comes to getting a degree like an MBA or an MPP. Working in that space and getting your feet wet to know if it's for you is better than going directly back to school to take 2 or 3 years to finish a degree and incurring on more debt to finally find out, undergrad 4 years plus the 2 years of grad school, 6 to possibly 7 years of education, and say, hey, I don't really like this. So I think it makes more sense for people to definitely get a little bit of experience and don't be afraid to branch out. Like, I grew up in Detroit. I went to college in DC. My first job happens to be in DC, but since then I've lived in San Francisco. I've lived in New York City. I've lived back in Michigan again. Don't be afraid to look at opportunities at companies that you admire in different regions. You can not only get a taste of what that place is like, but also know that, if you go back to school, would you want to live on the Northeast? Would you want to live on the West Coast or the South? So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of like expand your world and your horizons by getting a bit of experience before going back to school. But I'll also shift that over to Andrew because he has the MBA.
So Andrew, thank you, Michael. Andrew, yes, we do want you to go a little bit deeper in that question. And Michael brought up debt and considering, loans in school these days is double the amount it was when I went to school. So let's talk a little bit about that. How much is too much to pay for an advanced degree? Do you have any thoughts about that? Some MBA programs can be in excess of $100,000. And, I don't know about you all, but I don't have $100,000 laying around just in case. So talk a little bit about, Andrew, if you would, what's the expectation that you should consider or you should have? And should you also expect your employer to contribute if you are working while going to school?
That's a good question. It's challenging, but I'll try my best to answer it. I think one of the things when you consider going to school is going to be the financial component. The bottom line, do you have the money to pay for it? And if you do, if you don't, what's the risk of you not paying it back? The amount of people that are in debt from school is enormous in this country. But again, the idea is that when you have additional degree, you'll should be fairly compensated in corporate America. That's why when Michael was explaining about the risk reward system going directly out of school versus not, your experience is really going to help you negotiate a higher salary later on, with the degree augmenting your career profile. And you should be getting six figures and above, supposedly, in my opinion, about 5 years or 7 years out of business school. But again, what can you do to offset that cost? And sometimes you have great employers that will help their employees pay for school, but the traditional is the loan, and you have to. In my case, your first business case, and my ability, what's my rate, what's my chances of ability to pay this back in 10 to 15 years, and before the loans were forgivable as far as not affecting your credit score and everything else, and your ability to purchase homes later on and continue with your life. But your first business case is am I going to make enough to pay this back in 10 to 15 years? And that's a very question. That's a very heart-to-heart question you need to ask yourself in the beginning of the process. So it is an investment, so it's not cheap. So and you're not cheap. Everyone is priceless, but it's an investment. So therefore, it has to be treated as such.
That's a great answer. So I'm hearing you speaking to understanding your worth, to know the work that you want to do, and almost reverse engineering that to figure out if the price that you are paying for this advanced degree is almost worth it in the return. Let's talk a little bit more about how do you leverage your experience to obtain a degree? That's one of the questions for our panelists, our participants. How do you leverage your current experience to obtain that degree? We talked a little bit about the program and selecting a school, but how do you actually leverage your experience?
You can now, with your experience, more people, more abilities to pay back the money, more about more programs. You can, in some cases, and this is where some people have done, work for a university in the day and go to school at night. There's opportunities for you to do some courses online, offset the actual costs in traditional brick and mortar schools. But your experience should be helping you find ways to offset the costs. Instead of applying for a loan, you may apply for different loans, or you could apply for a grant. I know some people apply for grants and they're able to use the grants to pay for their secondary education. So your experiences should be able to help you find alternate ways to offset the cost of education.
That's good. I get that. Another question from our group. Okay, so thank you all for the great questions. Please do continue to ask questions, engage, comment. We have a question here that speaks about writing. So Michael, you'll probably be able to answer this one for us. How do you advise non-writers, non-professional writers to strengthen their writing skills to be able to tell their stories effectively? When you spoke about your experience in journalism, you have this strength in writing, both technical writing, it sounds like, as well as being able to help others to tell their story. If that is not your skill, how do you make shift happen there?
That's a great question. I think even for me, being trained as a journalist, like how we approach a story or how we approach writing is very different than writing for online initially. Like especially if you're a good feature writer, for example, like if you open a magazine and read an interview with, I have right now in front of me, Elle magazine, Lizzo, like that story is like 5 pages long. That's not something that typically would be on a website because people lose attention much faster online. And also writing for spaces like TV and the radio are vastly different than writing for print as well. So I think every time you sort of identify the type of area you want to work in, you have to make some sort of shift or learn a new skill altogether. So what was helpful for me actually was instead of going back to school for those skills. I literally utilized the internet. So there was a platform called lynda.com, and it's lynda.com. And it was actually acquired by LinkedIn, but it has tons and tons and tons and tons of tutorials on not only writing, but developing things for websites, Photoshop, HTML. But I actually had to take lynda.com courses. They were, fortunately, my job covered them at the time, to not only learn how to be a better technical writer, but to learn how to write for our site. And also just being embedded with a team of people who are going to take you under their wing and help you learn those skill sets. So for me, I didn't start my career as a manager. I started literally as like an assistant, if you will. In my role, a web producer was a news assistant. So that means like a reporter would write a story and hand it to me and say, hey, edit this. This is what I'm looking for. These are the guidelines. And as long as you kind of immerse yourself in like what you need to do, you can do that. Also, if you don't have a journalism background but want to get into that sort of writing, I recommend definitely getting an AP style guide to learn AP style, because that's how everything is written these days, and has been for.
AP is what?
An AP style guide. It's a book. Yeah, like the Associated Press style guide. It's how everything is written nowadays. So if you want to learn how to write for any publication, they're going to want to see that you know how to write AP. And the last thing I say on making a shift into journalism or shift into writing is that it is truly one of those careers where you have to start at the bottom. So if you are working in marketing right now, or you could be a pharmacist and you say, hey, you know what? I actually don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a journalist. You're going to have to start as somebody's assistant. So it's just one of those careers. It's like you hear the story of people in Hollywood who started in the mailroom in an agency, and now they're the head of CAA. Like it's just one of those fields where you have to kind of like prove your chops and kind of like pay your dues, if you will, if you want to advance in those careers. But to get that technical skill set, I definitely think there are resources out there and books that you can definitely take a shot at practicing and sharpen your skills that way. And if you don't have printed clips of your work online, start a blog, write for a website, pitch a story to your favorite publication. If you go to any website now, you can go to a link where there's contact us and submit a story idea. And they actually walk you through on what they're looking for as a writer. So there's so many ways to get your voice out there. You can either take your own platforms or you could work with a traditional one.
Thank you. Thank you. Very insightful. So Lynda was spelled lynda.com.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift the conversation a bit. So when we're talking about going into our next, when we're talking about making this pivot and making a decision to pivot, part of the conversation that both of you all have spoken on is really that balance and figuring out how do you do it all. So let's talk a little bit about making a decision inside a decision. So if you are already working, if you're currently, let's say you're out of school or you're deciding to go back, what does that look like? How do you incorporate balance? And I'm saying the word balance, but I really want you to go specific. Give us 3 or 4 different points of things that you specifically do when you're making a big life-changing decision, like to go back to school or not to go back to school.
Do you want me to start first?
I want you both. Michael, you can get us started.
Okay, sure. I think that's an amazing question, number one, because so many of us, like I mentioned before, reach that point where we're like, I don't know if this is something I want to do, but I also don't know if I'm prepared to be uncomfortable, make that shift or do something rash that could threaten my livelihood. So for me, I think the couple of things that kept me balanced were, number one, not just making a rash decision. So not just saying, you know what, I don't like this job, I'm just going to quit. Even when I quit my job to start being an entrepreneur, I knew clearly that I could go into a workspace or go into the consulting space, and I had a ton of experience. And there are a list of things that I knew how to do and that I had done for years with quantifiable metrics of success. So first thing, know yourself and don't make a rash decision. So make a game plan. Once you have that idea, just make a game plan. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a timeline that's immediate. You could say, like, I'm going to stay at this job in a year, and by next year, I want to be doing this. So in the time between you deciding to do it and the time you want to make that change, I would literally make a list of the type of things and tangible goals you could reach every month that will get you closer to that step that where you want to make a change. That way the decision doesn't feel like, oh my God, like tomorrow I have to do this. It feels like I'm going to do this next year and this is how I'm going to get there. So that creates a sense of personal security and space for yourself, and also just feeling like things are you're working toward a goal. Because I know there's nothing worse than having a job where you feel like there's no end of the tunnel, but when you create an end of the tunnel yourself, you can work towards it. So once you get there, it feels so much better. And then another thing I would say is to actually build a network of people, whether it's family members, whether it's friends, whether it's people you network with on LinkedIn, that you can constantly bounce ideas off of. Because, you know, I remember when I was looking for another job, I was like, maybe I want to work for this company. I want to work for Pepsi because Pepsi's cool. And, you know, reaching out to people who were like, oh, I know someone who works there. You could talk to them about what Pepsi is really like. Or I would really want to work for Nike. I know they're based in Oregon. I wonder what living in Oregon's like. And they could actually connect me with somebody that I knew who was there to make me have a more informed decision. So I think those are the two things. One, three things rather. Not making a rush decision. Number two, setting a goal and working towards it, and creating tangible things you can do. So like for someone who asked, like, I want to shift into writing. If you work in, I don't know, supply management right now, going into writing isn't something you can do tomorrow. But you could actually start blogging about what it's like to work in supply chain management. You can interview people in different career fields. So that way you're creating a space and creating a pathway and a year's worth of you writing and telling stories about something. So that way you can actually accomplish your goal in the next year. So make a plan. The last thing would be build a network of people that you trust that you can bounce ideas off of. So when at the end of it, you can have you have a plan, you have people you can talk to, and when you're ready to make that change, you feel secure in it yourself.
That's great. Great answers. Great responses and things for us to actually be able to consider when we're making the decision. Thank you. Andrew, can you answer the same question regarding balance and what that could look like, or some things that our participants should consider?
That's a good question. I know some people call it balance, but I call it work-life integration. You know, how can you add this new responsibility you're pursuing into your life? You know yourself. I have accountability partners, people that people I lean on as being to hold me accountable to say what I'm doing. Because you need support. You definitely need a support system. Not only, you know, the schedule and the strategic ideas that Michael brought up, but you need a support system. So, you know, going to school definitely my parents helped me, my siblings helped me, but, you know, you should not pursue that on your own. I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, it's okay to pursue on your own, but you definitely need a support system to help you, because sometimes you may not have, you know, you may have to sacrifice where you live, or, you know, you may sacrifice your car. You know, sometimes you understand that, you know, you may not make a little bit of money for a while, and you may need a little bit more money than the loan that has been given to you. So these are things that, you know, and these things you have to consider. And some people are parents, some people have kids and children. So that's another responsibility to, you know, not only pursue your educational goals, but you have your responsibility to maintain your household, and definitely having a good support system around you definitely will make the process of pursuing secondary education a lot smoother and easier.
Awesome. So thank you for giving specific, tangible, like we can go do this tomorrow. We can consider this tomorrow. Very, very helpful. So before we wrap up, two quick questions here. One is, I want you all to give 2 points regarding our mental well-being and the things that we should consider. Andrew, if you want to get us started, when you're considering bringing in something called post-secondary education, what does that mental well-being, what are some of the things that we should consider doing to make sure that we're actively taking care of this bigger goal that we have by starting with ourselves?
Excellent question. the pursuit of the degree should not determine your happiness. Because if you don't get it, are you going to be miserable? If you don't get it, are you going to be happy? So you should determine your happiness now and where your center of balance is now. And by doing so, your pursuit of the goal will augment yourself, not be the center of your core values. And a lot of times people go after goals and don't get it. It completely deflates them because the goal was part of their ego or confidence rather than the goal being something else to go after in life. And you have to determine your happiness in the beginning. And where's your balance for you to pursue it? Where are you? Are you in the middle? Are you in the middle of the circle? Are you at the edge of the circle? Are you outside the circle? Or is the circle around you? There's no circles, no boundaries around you. So where are you in that process? Where are you in the roadmap? And it's okay to say I don't know, but as long as you're happy with yourself first, then everything else you pursue will just be another feather in the cap, not the cap itself. So.
That's so good, Andrew. Thank you for bringing that to light right now. I think there's so much, focus on who we are and our identity, but starting with your personal strategy and getting clear on your center. That was epic. How about that? Michael, I want to hear your response to the same question. Can you speak to it?
Sure. I think the first thing I want to do is thank you for that, Andrew, as well. I definitely would piggyback on your second point about not being married to the idea of this accomplishment. So even when you're making a career shift, I think flexibility is key to your mental health, because it's easy to say, like, my goal is to work here, or my goal is to have this job with this title. Because I've had this much experience, I should be the manager, I should be the vice president, I should be this. And I think when you're making a change, we have to just realize that we're doing something that we haven't done really at all. Like, we may have the transferable skills to do that role or something in that field or that space, but I think we have to be a little bit flexible in what that actually looks like for us. I mean, we have to be flexible, and even if you change a company, some companies have titles that are very different depending on experience level. So, like, for example, I remember when I was thinking about leaving Google, at that point I was a communications manager. So I was looking for a communications manager job at Netflix because I wanted to live in LA. I know I don't live there now, but it was like, at the time I was like, oh, I live in LA. But all the titles said either coordinator or like senior manager. So I'm like, well, I could be a senior manager. But then every time I interviewed, they were like, you don't have the experience. But I kept asking myself, like, well, how do I not have the experience if this is something that I've been doing for the past 4 years? What I was told was, at your experience level, we call those people coordinators. So instantly I was like, well, I can't be a coordinator, because what if I leave Netflix, or on my resume, it looks like I went from being a manager to a coordinator? Like, that doesn't make sense for me. Like, all of these things that I had preconceived notions about, without taking into account that the work that I would be doing there would be something that's transferable to another manager level or something higher later on. So I think, as Andrew said, like, it's important to be not just married to a concrete goal and what that looks like when it comes to making career shift, because the more flexible you are with where you want to go, as long as your money is right, honestly, and you're happy in the environment and it suits you, I think you'll be good in the long run. And my last point is around the environmental piece of the job, because you have to, I think, culture, because culture is so important to where you go. No company is one and the same. And that is not just how the office looks on the inside. It's not the people in it, but it's also how you're evaluated. It's how you're paid. It's what your perks look like. It's what your benefits package looks like. And it's what your whole experience is shaped like. How many people of color are in that place? How many women are managers there? How many people are in certain positions? Because based off of the culture of the place, you could walk into the doors with the right paycheck or the right pay grade, but your potential to move forward or go to lunch with your colleagues or even having a meeting where you feel comfortable voicing your opinion could be very different based on where you go. And that honestly deteriorates a lot of people's mental health in workspaces where they don't feel like they have a safe space to be who they are. So I think my 2 key points about making any shift, whether it's going to a new job or even starting a new business school, because even graduate schools have very different cultures as well. Harvard's very different than University of Pennsylvania. And then vet school is different than a school that's in the South where you live, like what your apartment looks like, how much it costs to live in that place on top of your tuition. So I think it's very important to not only be flexible about where you want to go, but in that flexibility, be very conscious about how your decision is going to impact your day-to-day life outside of the things that you just want. Like you just want the degree, you just want the pay, but you also have to think about how you're going to feel every day walking into that space. Is it the right place for you?
So good. So good. Okay, guys. So what I want to make sure that you do is give us feedback. Let us know how these jewels, these nuggets, these thought-provoking ideas, how they impacted you today. Tell us about, would you like to see this happen again? Would you like to see this career success series happen again? Tell us also what other ideas you have for different success series. We are open. We want to make sure that we're serving our community and our folks that are within it. You heard us talk today from everywhere from the culture to understanding who you are and starting there. You heard us talk a little bit about comparing and considering where you want to go based on not just your own thoughts, but flooding your network. You heard different resources. You have really gotten a robust idea of being able to continue the conversation when you're considering making a decision about to go to school or not to go to school. We will get back to you regarding that prize winner who has been engaging and participating with us throughout the conversation. We will email you our winner. I want to invite you to check out the Digital Career Success Series throughout the year. You can do that by visiting nuljobsnetwork.com. I just have to thank our panelists. Oh my gosh. Andrew, Michael, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for sharing very transparently your experiences to help us to be able to move forward as we decide how to shift in our careers and for what's next for our lives. I am Landy Spearman, your host, and I have enjoyed you thoroughly. Thank you for participating in the conversation for this Digital Career Success Series.
Thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn.
Same here. Thank you for having me, and nice to meet you, Michael, virtually. Hopefully, we'll meet each other soon in person, and add me a LinkedIn as well. So, thank you very much for having me.
So I'm hearing both of you all say LinkedIn. So join the conversation. These gentlemen are saying, let's be in touch. Let's continue the conversation via LinkedIn. So that's an invitation that's just for you. Because you were here, because you participated, we want to continue the conversation. And my invitation is open as well. Make sure that you connect to us on LinkedIn. And again, make sure that you get connected to the Digital Career Success Series. Join us. We're doing this every 2 weeks. Thank you for the National Urban League for having us. And again, thank you for joining us in your time today.